So last night, the leaders of the three main parties in Nova Scotia had a chance to have an exchange over their competing visions in the CBC Leaders Debate, which you can find online. And we have been offering the same opportunity to every candidate in Cape Breton in our series of Candidates Roundtables. So far online on CBC Listen, you can find our roundtables for Sydney Member 2, Northside Westmount, and yesterday, Victoria the Lakes. And today, we close out the week with your candidates in Cape Breton East. Cape Breton East is the area that includes Sydney River, Lewisburg, Myra Road, and Donkin. This is a riding, a chunk of which used to be called Sydney River, Myra, Lewisburg. The incumbent in this riding is Brian Comer for the Progressive Conservatives. He's a nurse by trade, and he's running for his third term as MLA, and before dissolution, he was Minister of Mental Health. Challenging him for the NDP is Isabelle Lalonde, Events Coordinator at the Eldewig Arts Centre for New Dawn Enterprises. And Joe Ward, software entrepreneur, who had a surprising showing in the mayoral race for the CBRM last month, coming up the middle to finish second, and he has chosen to run for the Liberals. Brian Comer, Isabelle Lalonde, and Joe Ward, welcome back to Information Morning.
Good morning, Steve. Good morning, folks.
Thank you so much for having us, Steve.
Joe Ward, maybe we'll start with you. What problem do you have with the leadership in this riding and in this province that made you put your name forward to run?
Oh, wow. Right out of the gate, it became about trust. I mean, I know we have healthcare issues and affordability issues, but I don't know. I had so much optimism about Tim Houston when he first got elected, and then all of a sudden he's violating his own fixed election date legislation. That just really was terrible. And then interfering with the CBRM election, having a candidate, Fred Tilley, endorse Cecil Clark and then cross the floor 3 days later. Also, having a candidate, Darren O'Quinn, who was already committed to running for him in the provincial election and still running in the CBRM election. It's just terrible.
Thoughts on that, Brian Comer?
Yeah, certainly. I've been very privileged to be the MLA for over 5+ years. I left frontline healthcare to make a difference in Cape Breton East. Very proud of the work being done with the Cape Breton Medical Campus, the Sydney River Collaborative Healthcare Centre. I think when you watch the leaders' debate last night, very productive debate. I thought all leaders did really well, and I thought the Premier really hit it home. So very proud to run with the Premier and very proud for what's to come for Cape Breton East.
Well, what about the claim of Liberal leader Zach Churchill on that issue, the fixed election date, which Joe Ward says in a matter of trust for him, that it's not really about us or about the issues. It's about Tim Houston looking to jump on board with positive polling and a downturn in federal attitudes towards the Liberals and get another mandate going 8 months earlier than his promised election date. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think when you look at the last election in 2021, obviously healthcare was a key focus. We've done, tremendous work to move that forward. It certainly takes time, but there's a lot that has been done. As we move forward towards, lowering taxes, making life more affordable, focusing on key infrastructure projects across the province. I think it's fair for Nova Scotians to have a say with the new mandate, and they'll obviously have a chance to do that November 26th, and I look forward to that.
I guess, though...
So you have 9 more months, Brian. You still have a mandate.
Yeah, so I would say if there's a shift in priorities of the government, I think it's fair to ask Nova Scotians for their say and for their confidence. And when I've been, speaking to thousands of constituents on the doorsteps over the last number of weeks, I often ask them, who would you rather lead this province for the next term? And it's ultimately up to Nova Scotians and citizens of Cape Breton East, and I look forward to putting that decision in their hands.
Would you be willing to ask them in July on the fixed election dates and allow everyone to be prepared?
Yeah, as I just said, I think, focusing a new mandate, it's only fair to give Nova Scotians their say, and that's all I'll be saying about that.
And we're going to go to Isabelle in just a second, but Brian Comer, what is that new shift in focus you're talking about?
I think lowering taxes by indexing income tax brackets, that's a good initiative that the government pushed forward. I think if you look at the needs in the province in terms of infrastructure, in terms of, the population growth of the province, there's certainly shifting priorities with affordability, making life more affordable for Nova Scotians. So I think it's fair to ask them for their confidence to do that.
Isabelle Lalonde with the NDP. What are some of the specific things that you were seeing in this riding that made you want to put your name forward?
I'm hearing a lot of what I'm sure the rest of Nova Scotia is hearing, that people are having problems with affordability and housing and health care. But for those of us living rurally, at the health care topic, we are at an increased risk for health emergencies based on our locations. I know when I was in labor with my youngest, I drove back and forth over the Lewisburg Highway 6 times because I was so worried about being stuck in Lewisburg so far away. I didn't know if an ambulance was going to get to me in time. And I'm hearing this a lot from other people, especially when people are being paired with family doctors and primary care physicians on the other side of the island. People are driving hours to go see a family doctor, as compared to the NDP plan, which is to build primary care clinics in locations that will pair patients with them based on their postal code. So people do not have to drive in pain to the other side of Cape Breton Island to see their family doctor.
Joe Ward, after it came out that you were running for the Liberals, I heard several people say, hey, I thought one of his claims to fame when he was running for mayor was his independence.
Yeah, absolutely. Independent thinker, and still am. It took about a week of negotiations, and it all hinged on making sure that I wasn't just going to be endorsing the platform as it was, and that there was going to be something specifically for the CBRM. And I said, hey, there is not going to be a Joe Ward running for the Liberal Party unless it's the Joe Ward that ran to become mayor of the CBRM. So you'll see in the platform now we have a commitment to actually bring in $300 million to the CBRM, to have that allocated at $75 million per year for our needs here. That was actually something introduced by Derek Mumbercat, and something that comes directly from me was a commitment to lower taxes in the CBRM and to fix our broken property tax system. So you're seeing the same Joe Ward. I mean, there is even the NSPCs have put out a press release talking about how I criticized our leader of the party in the past. Of course I did. I'm an independent thinker. When I see things that are not going the way I think they should go, I speak up. I've praised Tim Houston. I've also criticized him, and that's where I'm at. I'm acting according to what I think is best for the CBRM. And what is the NSPC committing right now in this election for the CBRM?
I guess though, it wasn't just criticism. You said Liberals have a disastrously weak leadership and need a full rebuild. Why join a team whose leadership you believe is weak, that you think, to quote you, has not much to offer? Why not run as an independent?
Well, Steve, I'm sure you've covered it multiple times. Independents have a very difficult path to victory. It's a political system. There's supposedly no party politics in the CBRM. At this level, you join a team. And here's the thing. We look at the platform. This team is rebuilding. That's why I'm on board. If it looked like they hadn't been able to put a platform together, then I wouldn't be there. Now, on the other hand, Tim Houston started out pretty good, and then he took a switch. So he went out and hired someone who should be registered as a lobbyist to run his communications, the director of communications, Stephen Moore. He actually put what seemed to me like a job application out on Twitter where he described how Houston had to become a populist, just not an angry populist, and how he had to frame things and how he had to make it about Trudeau in order to win the next election. So, things change in politics. These parties are so philosophically similar that it's hard to tell, other than the color of the banner they fly, what they are at times. And there's a lot of similarity, but the plan that we have in place right now is one that I can endorse.
We're 14 minutes before 8 o'clock. You're listening to Information Morning through Cape Breton East at 92.1 FM on the dial. This is our roundtable for the riding of Cape Breton East, which takes in areas around Meyer Road, Sydney River, Lewisburg areas. And we're with your candidates, Brian Comer, Isabelle Lalonde, and Joe Ward. Brian Comer, Isabelle Lalonde mentioned concerns about health care, about being attached to a primary care practitioner. Of course, healthcare is something that you're involved in a key role as Minister of Mental Health and Addiction. Where do you see movement on healthcare since you've been in office?
Yeah, so certainly I got involved. I went from directly, clinical frontline healthcare to public service in 2019. It's been an issue that I'm, very interested in and advocating for. I think if you look at the new Sydney River Collaborative Primary Care Healthcare Center slated to open early in the new year, that's a great example of innovative thinking to attach, many constituents of Cape Breton East to primary care. You look at the last year, across the province, 250 new doctors, over 1,700 nurses. There's certainly more work to do, But like I said, there was a lack of strategic long-term planning by the current leader of the opposition, who is also the Minister of Health, that kind of left us in this situation. But there's lots of work to do. But we certainly have a lot to be proud of.
Isabelle Lalonde, does that convince you when it comes to healthcare? The new day program, new doctors, new nurses. Of course, there's the PET scan, the cath lab, a new medical school coming to Cape Breton University. 3 years is not a long time to turn around a bus. What would you say to people who say, we want to give Tim Houston another chance? This has not been enough time.
I say if he wanted more time, he should have kept the original election date in the summer. That would have given him more time to finalize some more of these projects. But instead, they decided to call an election now, so we're having the conversation now.
What about those advancements in healthcare, including more access to virtual care, more access to clinics at pharmacies, for instance?
I think that the virtual care is a $12 million Band-Aid on the problem. People don't want to have to speak to an app. When you're in a crisis, you don't want to go to an app to try and figure out what your next steps are. We need in-person primary care, and it needs to happen for everybody in Nova Scotia. And we need to not have to drive hours to get there. Yes, absolutely, a primary care clinic in Sydney River is fantastic, except that there's people who are still going to be paired with doctors in Badek and in North Sydney. And I don't think that's fair. I think that the system has its priorities mixed up, and I think that it's time for somebody new. Joe said it best. There really is no huge difference between the Liberals and the Conservatives. I think if people want something different, then the NDP is right here ready to give it to them.
You also mentioned that something that prompted you to run was looking around in your role as someone who works in the nonprofit sector and seeing stalled community projects. What did you have in mind?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking this question. In my role in nonprofit management, I've worked very closely with the municipal, provincial, and the federal governments. And I've seen time and time again projects in my community, such as the Louisbourg waterfront development and the Louisbourg-Gabarouse Road reopening, that have stalled, and not because of the municipal and the federal involvement, because they are in on those projects. It seems to be that the priorities at the provincial level are not Cape Breton East.
Brian Comer, what about the Louisbourg waterfront development?
Yeah, certainly I've had the chance to work on many, infrastructure projects across the constituency. I think when you look at the Louisbourg Lighthouse Trail, for example, the province, gave over $150,000 to get that project finished. The Gabarouse seawall was over $400,000 of provincial investment with the federal government as partners to get that project finished. I know with the waterfront redevelopment project specifically, there's still some conversations that are ongoing between the three levels of government, and I'll certainly be happy to pick those up if I'm fortunate enough to get reelected.
So what is the state of those talks, and what's been your involvement?
Yeah, so there was certainly some cost overrun concerns, post-pandemic. So I've worked with, the member of parliament and the council at the time to kind of revisit that. I know the Cape Breton Partnership was, conducting some additional community consultation a number of months back. So we'd have to revisit that to see where that's at.
Joe Ward, go ahead, Isabelle.
Yeah, thank you. I'd also just like to jump in that it's also the restructuring and rebranding of Build Nova Scotia, that all of a sudden there is no home for this kind of project anymore within the provincial government. Their mandate changed when they rebranded, and that's left this project stalled.
Joe Ward, you mentioned that you had Zach Churchill add relief for property taxes in the CBRM to the platform. By what mechanism? How would that work?
Well, basically, when we talked, it was like we have this pool of $300 million coming in, and I told them I can do a lot of good with that in taxation. But they looked at my profile, my mayoral platform, and they looked at the different strategies that I was proposing, and they said basically, listen, we're not doing anything that disrupts the system in a way that harms people. And I said 100% agree. But these are some of the things that I think we can push through. One is just simply transferring more resources that we can lower the tax rates that way. But we need to find ways to incentivize housing in doing that as well. So they said we need to get some tax experts behind this and sort of vet these things and figure out how to do that. But overall, the most minimalistic way to go about it is to simply transfer more resources and lower the rates. I just want to jump back quickly. Zach Churchill in healthcare, when he was the minister, he had a doctor waiting list of about 60,000 people, and he certainly deserved criticism for not getting that list down. but that list is now over 140,000 people.
But when it comes to lowering property tax in the CBRM, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you have a plan to make a plan, but don't actually have a plan.
No, I have a plan. I mean, the easiest plan is you simply transfer more equalization resources.
But that's not in the platform?
Well, it's in the platform because we have $300 million committed.
For infrastructure, that's not for equalization or a direct transfer. Well.
That's a pot of money that we can reallocate, and that's why you want somebody like me going to the province, because I'm not going to go and rubber stamp anything that the leader says. We're going to go into caucus and we're going to negotiate. It's not going to be a Brian Comer thing where the caucus tells them Cape Breton is getting everything, and then you walk away and argue with the CBRM about why Bill 340 is so great.
Can I jump in there, Steve?
Yep. Mr. Comer, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think what you're seeing here is, there's no plan. Property tax rates are set by the municipality. This is $300 million, might as well be $500 million. It's just an arbitrary number that was kind of made up at the 11th hour with no strategic plan of how to spend it. So I think people will see that.
So what about
the CAO, Marie Walsh, just resigned, stating that she's tired of dealing with the province. The province right now is Tim Houston. Where was the arbitrary number of the $15 million? I actually, before Brian was even running for the party, I was sitting in the office negotiating that with Tim Houston. It's just that when it got around to Bill 340, they rolled it in and didn't do anything more for us. There's lots of money in the province. We don't need that much. It's $98 million in residential property taxes. It doesn't take a whole lot to reduce the rate. You just have to have a government that's actually committed to doing it. Tim Houston also told me that maybe the reason that more equalization resources weren't coming to the CBRM because the province had historically invested billions in Sydney Steel, and maybe that was the reason the province sort of needed to keep those resources for themselves.
Brian Comer, what about that state of the relationship with the municipality, which was a key election campaign, the municipal election, and the fact that under the new transfer agreement, CBRM is actually going to get $2 million less per year than it was getting?
Yeah, certainly I have a great working relationship with the three councillors, that make up Cape Breton East, with Councillor Gillespie, Parsons, and newly elected Councillor McNeil. So I think certainly I know they're going through a process now of looking at their finances and coming up with a strategic plan for the next 4 years, which I think is a really good thing. So I'll certainly be happy to sit down and have those conversations on specific asks once they come forward for CBRM, because I know that's a very important thing to move forward with.
Isabelle Lalonde with the NDP, what about that relationship between the CBRM and the province?
I think it's just worth noting that I'm the first and still the only candidate to get back to the Nova Scotia Equalization Fairness Group on their open letter to all candidates regarding equalization, because the NDP was very excited to announce that we will be doubling the $15 million to $30 million annually, ongoing, with negotiations possible. This is not a period at the end of the sentence. This is a starting point to begin the sentence, to begin the relationship between the NDP government and CBRM.
Where is that money going to come from?
That is all in the budget. That is on the NSNDP platform page.
Joe Ward, Brian Comer, Isabelle Lalonde, thank you so much for your time. A good conversation, and best of luck over the next week and a half.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Good luck, everyone. Thanks, Steve.
Your candidates for Cape Breton East, Brian Comer for the PCs, Isabelle Lalonde for the NDP, and Joe Ward for the Liberals. And coming up next week, we have Glace Bay Dominion on Monday, Richmond on Wednesday, Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pier on Friday. That leaves us the day before the election, Inverness, where you're also going to be having a new member for sure, because Alan McMaster is not running again.